Welcome, everybody, to Cycle Jerks Podcast, episode 113. We are very excited to be joined today by Anna Hicks. And she has gone from racing on a borrowed bike or a hand-me-down bike and now riding for the Cyclist Pro cycling team. And she just got back from a European trip of racing, and we're excited to have her on the podcast. Thanks for joining us, Anna.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, so I first heard about you from Vince Murdoch, and he started the Enjoy Cycling team in Sacramento, and he had mentioned that you were just up and coming and very exciting, and on this bike that wasn't quite right, but still just doing really well. And then at the same time, I was starting this live team with Helena Gilbert, and I was trying to get you guys synced up, and it turns out you already knew each other, but it didn't work out. And then you were just like, yeah, well, hold my beer. I'm going to sign with this pro team and I'm going to go race in Europe.
Yeah, it was kind of a crazy year last year, I would say. I met Vince and the Enjoy guys at Rodeo Cross in Folsom, I guess last October. And
Yeah.
then yeah, life has changed quite a bit since then. It's been a wild journey for sure.
Yeah.
So fill me in. The team website says relatively newcomer. What does relatively newcomer mean? Like, when did you start racing on a bike that didn't fit? How long ago?
Yeah, so I started uh, cycling in general. Just I got on a bike for the first time in the beginning of 2020. So kind of right before COVID. I was running Division One at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and then I was injured for most of my running career. So my very short running career was only a few years, but I was injured a lot. So I kind of just hopped on a commuter bike on the bike path down in Folsom when I was home for Christmas that year, and I just fell in love with cycling after that. So I kind of got into it. I was cycling a couple days a week just to kind of supplement the running training, and then I'd say like summer of 2021 is when I did my first race. So I did just like the local NorCal starting that June, and then kind of haven't looked back. So
Wow. Yeah. Pretty incredible how it just happened so quickly.
Like a rocket. That's a rocket, man.
Yeah. And then you finished, you got 8th at Road Nats. Is that right?
yeah,
Yeah.
so back
What
in
was
June
that
at
like?
Pro Road Nets.
That this year?
Yeah, just a couple months ago.
Georgia. Is it Georgia? Where was it?
No, Nashville, I think.
In Knoxville,
Knoxville.
Tennessee.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
what was that? I mean, I
Yeah,
can't.
that was a.
Uh-oh.
Who's delayed?
Sorry, you guys froze. Can you hear me?
Anna?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you just froze up. I don't know.
Hello.
Are you on Wi-Fi or
Sorry. Yeah,
cellular?
you guys froze too.
Yeah. Are you on Wi-Fi or cellular? I'm gonna pause it right here. All right. So, well, I can't. What was that like showing? That had to be your first national champs. What was that? Were you nervous going in, and then to post that kind of result? Geez, just killing it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was one of those races where I just really came in with zero expectations.
Mm-hmm.
It was my first time racing a road national championship. It was only like my third pro race here in the States. And so it's crazy when you're lining up next to girls that have been like my idols in the sport, like you have Chloe Dagger like on the start line next to you, and like Corinne Lebecki, and just like some of these kind of stars in the sport. And it's a wild
Yeah.
experience to be like lining up next to them and tossing your hat in that ring. I think throughout the race it was really just my goal to just, I don't know, stay in and not get dropped. And it's funny, like when you get to the end of the race and you're like, okay, like I haven't been dropped. Like time to go. Like, we're in this and it's time to execute something. So it was really just one of those races where it's just step by step, right? Like, I didn't come into the race thinking I was going to get a top 10. I just came into the race like hoping I was going to finish that race, and so it's just
Yeah.
the goal kind of changes throughout the day. And so far, like, those have always been my best races, when there's no expectations and you're just really present and taking it like step by step. It's like every lap you got to get up that hill, and then a lot of the last, I think, 4 or 5 laps, I got popped on the hill and had to chase back on. So there's just every lap, it was like, just chase back on, just stay in.
Right.
So it was a surprising race. And it was one of those ones where you can see your potential, and it really helps you kind of believe in yourself. So it was a special day for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to rewind the clock a little bit, but yeah, I totally agree. Like, I mean, I'm not even going to begin to compare my racing to yours at any level. But and Mike, we've talked about this before. But lately, when I go up, and mostly I'm just racing the gravel, but when I go up and I show up with no expectations other than just go out and have fun, I seem to have been turning in some of my best results versus standing on the start line thinking I got to get first, I got to get first, I got to get a podium, and you get all wound up, wrapped around the axle and all that. So I think that's a great mindset. So for whatever it's worth, it's just I agree with you 100%. So, but
Yeah.
hold on, so I, you're a runner, right? 2020 to in 2020 or whatever you said. Now you get on a bike, so you've got an engine, right? Because you've been running, so that's awesome. Now in 2023, you're eighth in Nats. Like, okay, other than get on the bike and ride, well, how did you get there? I mean, you've obviously, did you hire a coach? What did you do? At what point did you say, okay, I got this, and I've got to, there's a shot at this, and so you obviously have to dial up something, right? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in 2020, I just kind of started riding. It was very casual. I was just having fun, like, how far can I go today? How high can I climb? Stuff like that. And then later in that year, I started befriending all the cycling community in San Luis Obispo, and I gotta say, like, it's the best community I've ever experienced. So many great people there, so many great talented athletes, and they just kind of like brought me in under their wing throughout like the COVID times. A lot of us were in school together, and like without class, we had a lot of time to ride. So whether it was like the Cal Poly cycling team or just kind of the local pros, there you got like Chris Blevins, Anders Johnson, all the whole Volet factory teams there, and they just took me under their wing. They brought me on rides. And I think I really started to kind of fall in love with cycling and start getting a lot faster by just riding with them, and pretty much just getting my ass kicked every weekend on long rides. And it was some of the most fun rides too, because I wasn't racing, so there was really like no expectations or pressure. It was just like pushing my limits and like learning a lot and just having a lot of fun out there with like some of my closest friends. And then that summer when I did my first race, I didn't have a coach or anything. And then after I did well in a few races, I actually started working with Blake Anton, who was my first coach for the first like year and a half of my career. And he works with the Volet factory team. He's on that team. And he was just an amazing mentor and coach and leader who really, I mean, we went to races together. I went with the boys and they just brought me along, gave me
Mhm.
their tips and sent me on my way, so I
So
kind of just learned by
you
jumping in.
you're racing unattached at that point. You're just okay.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. So Siniska was my first team I ever joined. So I was just racing on my own throughout all of like 2021, 2022. And then so I went to the collegiate nationals for Cal Poly. So I did the mountain bike nationals in the fall of 21, and then I went to road nationals in spring of 22. And my results there kind of got the attention from the USA cycling development people. And so they brought me in for a talent ID camp last November.
Is that
So at that camp,
Alec
yeah.
Alec Pasqualina?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Good,
Alec and Kelsey.
yeah, good friend, very good friend of mine and Mike. So okay, go
Yeah.
on.
Okay. Yeah. Alec's been amazing in kind of guiding my career and being a mentor for me.
Great.
so yeah, he brought us out to Tucson and helped us kind of just learn how to reach out to teams, kind of what our potential could be. We raced the L Tour Tucson in November, which was really fun. It was my first time in a group more than like 20 people, so it was a little chaotic of a start, but it was fun. And then yeah, so then I guess come this spring, still wasn't on a team, but I was racing a little bit, and then I got recommended to Sinisco when they needed to pick up some riders later in the season, and they reached out, and I guess then we jumped in with both feet and went to Europe, and here we are.
Wow.
Yeah, it's I got this big grin on my face when you're talking about Alex, and I can't imagine how Dave must feel. But Alex, I first met Alex. He was
Alex.
just Alec. He was yeah. Shame on me, Alec. He was working at Dave's shop, and he was just a Grom kid, and then we started riding Diablo together, and then he's gone on to do great things, and yeah, he's been on the podcast, and yeah, so it's kind of neat to hear you like these dots connecting, with Alec.
He's probably too humble, and this is about you, Anna, but he's too humble. But I'll never forget, he was in the shop one time, and there was another rider in there, very strong rider, and he was talking about his time up Mount Diablo, and Alec got on his bike and left, and the guy looked at me and said, he has no idea how fast he is.
Yeah, he's a pretty accomplished rider in his own right. But
yeah. But anyways, back to you, Anna. Enough memory lane.
So Saniska, so when I'm curious, is there money involved in this, or is it just like, is this just an opportunity to travel and be part of a team and get the support that you need to be a racer? Because I'm always curious with professional women's racing. It's definitely it's hard enough as a domestic U.S. pro man, and then I know that the women's, I know that there hasn't been equal pay, or in some cases there's not even pay. What do you mind discussing that at all? I mean, was there a contract involved, and is there any type of?
Yeah, for sure. So Saniska is really trying to like change the way that women's cycling is done, especially in the US. They want to be kind of setting the new standard for like how athletes are like treated and compensated for riding. So that's a really special opportunity because yes, all the riders on the team are paid.
Right.
Going into next year, like Saniska will be my primary income and will allow me to not have to work a full-time job, not have to go to school, things like that. And that's like a really incredible and special opportunity. And they do that across the board for all their riders. And
I love it.
even compared to the European continental teams, a lot of them don't pay a competitive wage. And
Yeah.
so with our owners, with Chris and Jeff, they're really trying to change just the standard and change the sport. Because I feel like for a long time, it's been known that like, women cyclists all have like PhDs and they all work full time, they've all been to school, and so it's really cool to see them kind of foster this like younger generation of athletes and really give them the stability to go all in on this. And so I feel very lucky to be a part of it. And I hope that there, is a new kind of standard or expectation where there's more support for women's cycling. Cause I definitely think it's going places in the US.
Yeah, it's long overdue. But so you make the team, and welcome to the team. Pack your bag. You're going to Europe, right? So, which must have been exciting in itself. I'd like to hear a little bit about that. But you said they're trying to change things here in the U.S. But when I looked at the race calendar, so many of them were European races. Like, is it? But so this isn't just an international thing. This is U.S. Build the sport in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, so we're one of the few continental teams that race in Europe that's owned by a US, that's owned in the US. And so that means the majority of our riders are the US. The original purpose of the team was to develop US riders. The best way to develop US riders and bring them up to that world level is to bring them to Europe. So they found the resources and the right people to really make that opportunity happen. So we do race all the US races here. So, this past year they did Redlands. I joined them at Gila, Joe Martin Nationals. We did a couple crits. We did like Tulsa Tough, some other stuff like that. And so we do focus on the US racing, but because it's such a short block, we do fill most of the calendar then with US races, either in the early like winter, spring, and then we do like the full 3.5 month block in the late summer, fall.
Okay.
Great.
Great.
So, what was it like when you first towed the line in I think it was Belgium, right? Belgium was your first trip. Going over there as a U.S., relatively new in the sport racer, and then getting thrown in with the Belgians. What was that experience like?
No pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely that first European race, I was pretty terrified, I'm going to be honest. I think I was still kind of nervous in the peloton, even in US races, like still kind of getting used to those like skills and those dynamics. So then going over to Europe was definitely a challenge, I'd say. I was very scared my first time. And then once I was out there, I was like, okay, this isn't that different. And everybody, hyped this up like European racing, so terrifying. It's so scary. You're probably going to die. Like
Yeah.
they made it really dramatic. And then once I was in it, it wasn't as bad. So I'd say for anyone who's like making that leap, like don't be nervous. Like you'll be fine. Just ride your bike. It's not that different. It is faster. The girls are more aggressive, but it's not anything too crazy.
Yeah. So, with Saniska, is there a dedicated race leader, team leader in each? And does that team leader, if there is, does that team leader always a team leader? And then there's the defined roles, or do you guys change your roles depending on the race and the course and all that?
We typically change our roles for every race. So we have a few riders that are much more experienced than the rest of us. So a couple of our European girls, they've raced at the world level for many years. They've raced for, I think like 7 to 9 years, maybe. They raced the Tour de Femmes last year. They've raced a lot of like the world tour level races. And so they're just way more experienced than a lot of us US riders who are pretty new to the sport. And so typically like they are our road captains at races, just because they have the race tactics and they know the riders, they know the courses. So typically they'll be the ones leading us, and then depending on the course, we'll ride for different riders. If it's a climbing course, we'll ride for our climber, sprint course, something like that. It'll change.
And
So go ahead, Mike.
what's your role on the team?
It definitely changes with different races. I have been all in on a domestique role in Europe. I have been also ridden for different races. Like at nationals, we were riding for myself and Ashley Fry, who's our like really strong climber. So we're riding for the two of us. It really just depends on the race. I would say typically I'm like they're riding for me, or like I have like if I make a break, then we're like riding for me, or it's my job to cover moves. And if I get in a break and it's a climb finish, then I'm working for Ashley, or I'm working for Greta, like one of our French riders. So it really just depends, and a lot of times we're just kind of figuring it out as we go too.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like super defined because we're such an inexperienced team with so many new US riders. I think a lot of times we're not necessarily the team that's controlling the races in Europe. And so a lot of times we're like being opportunistic riders. And with that comes, it's hard to have a defined role because you never know kind of what's going to happen. But I think the team's progressing a ton. And this past race, we did Giro Toscana in Italy. And it was really cool because this was like a special race where we rode together so well. And it's like we had all of our riders at the front. We were all covering moves. Like we were able to like execute our plan and do it very seamlessly. And that was really exciting. So I can tell that this team is really going places and the girls are riding together better. And I'm excited to see like what we do for the rest of the season and for next year.
And that was just a function of now you've been together longer and you're starting to gel and starting to understand each other, so you know better to ride as a team. That's just a function of time, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think for some of us US riders, like our goal has just been to like learn how to get to the front of the peloton, learn to stay at the front of the peloton, learn how to be efficient up there. So like once we're able to do that, then we're able to be, more part of a team plan and like contribute more, right? Because instead of just trying to survive, we're actually able to be part of the action and be part of the sport or part of the race.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've talked a little bit on this show about the Tour de France Unchained Netflix special, and it's really helped educate a lot of people about the team dynamic in the sport. The individual riders always are the ones who get the glory, but there's always the team that helps them get there, and a lot of times that gets lost, especially with Americans' understanding of cycling. Yeah, it's been nice to kind of get that level of education through that documentary, and then so it is always curious when talking with people that are on teams, how much is there really structure, but I think it probably takes a lot of time, to your point, to develop a structure, right, to put yourself in a position where you can control the race. And a lot of times it is seat of your pants, even if you go in with the best laid plans, because there are other teams and dominant riders, and pace dictates the plan could all go out the window in the first 20 miles,
Best laid plans of mice and men, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I can imagine that when you come back here for the US for next season, this coming season, you're going to have a real leg up on a lot of the domestic riders here that didn't get that experience that you gained over there. So it's going to be exciting. I think that'll be an opportunity for you to really push forward those team tactics like you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think our team has big plans for next year, and I think we're gonna have some of our European riders come over for the US races to kind of see what we can do here. So I'm really excited for that part because
Yeah.
I think the races here are super fun. So
Yeah,
Well,
I want to come back to that, but there's still things that are to play before we keep going into the racing. Where are you right now? Where are we calling? Where are you calling in from? So you said home was Placerville, right? But then you've been down in Cal Poly, down in the San Luis Obispo area.
yeah, so I'm kind of homeless right now. When I signed with Saniska,
Never heard that before.
yeah, you don't really make it in cycling until you move back in with your parents, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so when I signed with Saniska, I was working full time in San Luis Obispo for a sports nutrition company, Fluid Sports Nutrition. And then when I signed with them, I didn't know that I was going to be going to Europe. And then once I figured out that I was going to be packing up for a few months, I actually left my job and my lease was ending right at the same time. So right before I left for Europe, I moved all my stuff to my parents' house in Placerville. And then I left for Europe, and now I'm back here for about a week. And then on Tuesday, I'm going to head up to Colorado for a couple months. So kind of bouncing all over the place, but
Nice.
So
yeah.
I don't mind saying I'm jealous. So you're an accomplished writer and a brainiac. So you graduated from Cal Poly.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I have a degree in nutrition from there.
Nice.
Oh, nice. That's a subject on this podcast a lot.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time trying to figure out.
We've established we need a part 2 with Anna. So.
Yeah. We'll go deep dive nutrition. Well, I want to go back to the Giro Toscana real quick, because one of your Ashley was given the Maglia dell'Eleganza. I recently was over there in Italy and France, and I love the Italians. Their spirit is so infectious, and their love for life, and the fact that they have this Maglia dell'Eleganza, that just says, like, that's just such a cool thing. So what was there like a team celebration for this, or was it just kind of like at the end it's like, she got the Eleganza? Yeah.
What is it?
It's like for the rider that exudes sportsmanship, grace, and elegance, Dave.
I should go. I'd win that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not fast. I
So
can't climb, but I've got grace.
yeah, so that's what I mean about the Italians. The Italians just cover all the bases, and they look at life with this different. Yes, you win, but then there's also these other things. I don't know. I am enamored with the Italians, and then when I saw that jersey, I was like, oh, that's so Italian. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal, I would imagine. Yeah,
Yeah, I think all of us weren't really sure what it meant.
right.
And so we were like, yeah, you want a jersey. Also, like, what's the jersey for? And like what happened? Like, and then we were also all like packing up and leaving the
Uh-huh.
race. And so it
Uh-huh.
was like we didn't really get a chance to like celebrate or like figure out what it meant or like do anything because I think like half of us like had to catch a flight the next day. I was flying back to the US at like 4 a.m. the next day, and then the other half of the team was trying to drive back to our service course. So it was kind of a chaotic finish to the race.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, we were all stoked that Ashley got it. I mean, Ashley's like the nicest, like just most positive, happy person. And so I think it was just so fitting. And so it was really exciting. She also rode super well. So it was cool to see her like get a jersey and get to be on the podium. It was a really good finish for the race for sure.
Yeah, that's cool.
Nice.
All right. So I also noticed that you are signed on with Voice in Sport. And so
Yes.
looking into that, that seems like a really cool, like I just spent some time on it this morning. So that's how up on it I am. But I watched some of the videos, the messaging, and can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that I am involved in, but I'm not as involved as I want to be.
Mhm.
So when I was running in college, I was like dealing with a lot of challenges. I was injured, um, didn't have great like team culture. There was a lot of challenges in my running career. And so I looked to a lot of professional athletes, coaches and stuff. Like I listened to just a ton of podcasts and I was just felt so inspired by so many women ahead of me. A lot of runners, a lot of cyclists, triathletes. And so a lot of them were involved with Voice in Sport. So originally I had signed up for Voice in Sport when I was in college, and I was like, I just want to be like a part, like I just want to be a member in it. And like I want to receive mentorship from all these women because I have so much to learn. And then when I signed up, they were like, hey, like it looks like you're a D1 athlete, like you're kind of on the older range of like the girls that are involved. Like, would you want to be a mentor? And I was like, uh, yeah, like sure. And I had just like, a wave of imposter syndrome. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what's going on. I can't mentor anyone. Um, but slowly, like I kind of figured out things that I had learned from my journey, and I was able to do a couple sessions and mentor some really talented young athletes and ones I'm still in contact with now. And it was just the most rewarding and exciting experience. So now that I have kind of stepped more into a role of a professional athlete, I'm really excited to get more involved with Voice in Sport because I think what they're doing is really special. For anyone that doesn't know what Voice in Sport is, it's a company that wants to promote visibility of women in sport and provide mentorship and education for coaches and athletes and young athletes, like just coming in to any and all sports. So we have mentors from all different sports, and it's a really cool program.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
terrific.
it seems like it. I mean, we talk about it quite a bit on the podcast, but it is neat to see where women's cycling is heading with the coverage now. We got the Tour de France, we've got the Paris-Roubaix, and obviously the Giro, and these events are being televised, and yeah, it's like finally being put out there in the universe for
Yeah,
everybody.
I,
It's
I
the
can, I concur. I mean, if we rewind the clock a little bit, one of the first things that Mike taught me as a retailer in Giants philosophy, which is why they had the Live brand, is women are intimidated by bike shops, right? And so think about they're intimidated by bike shops, and think about getting them on just coming out to come for their first ride. I used to do these group rides, but that, I mean, that's one thing. Now think about the level of intimidation must occur, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of someone that actually wants to try to break into the pro ranks, or someone who wants to take their riding to the next level. That's why that's just so impressive to see uh, that type of program, or those type of teams, or those type of development programs. It's just just fascinating to hear that. So
Yeah, I mean, for years, the UCI believed that the Paris-Roubaix was too tough for women. How ridiculous is
yeah,
that? You
yeah,
know?
this is just
Uh, so yeah, there's been a lot of growth in the last few years in women's cycling, and things are trending in the right direction. And I love that's one of the things I love about working for Giant is I get to represent Liv also. And Liv is, this year actually for the first 2 years of the Tour de Femme, they sponsored the white jersey, which was the young rider category, and we're going to do it again next year. And yeah, Liv has 2 World Tour Pro teams with Jayco and the Liv team, and so yeah, we're heavily invested in professional women's cycling, and it's just very exciting to see the growth and development of it.
yeah, and I find that I watching the women's cycling, I find it equally as exciting to watch, and so it's great, terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a really exciting time to just be a part of women's cycling, especially here in the US. I know, like from USA Cycling, they're really supporting their women's programs, supporting their women's development. They have really big goals for what they want US cycling to achieve, and a lot of that has to do with their women's programs. So, I mean, just recently, I got to spend some time when I was in Europe. I met up with some of the USAC, like the board members, and like with Brendan Quirk and stuff. And I got to talk to them a lot about USA, or about the US women's cycling, and just their goals for where it's going. And they just have such an inspiring just goal and message. And it was just really cool. And it's really cool to be a part of that. And it's cool to see, US brands and people really buying in and supporting it, because I really think it's going places. I think like the next 2 Olympic cycles are going to be big for women, for women's US, and so it'll be cool to see for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And you said you're off to Colorado. What's going on there?
I'm just going there to hang out with my friends and ride bikes.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sounds so
There's just a great
serious.
community up there. Like a lot of my friends are there, whether cycling or not cycling. Somehow, like all of my friends ended up in like the greater Boulder area, and so I have some friends I'm staying with up there for a couple months. So I'm just gonna go check it out, go see what all the Boulder hype is about. Do
right.
some
Yes.
races, maybe we'll see.
You got to change the narrative, though. You got to be like, oh, I'm doing some elevation training, real serious stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sleeping in a hyperbaric
Yeah.
chamber and, riding at
So your coach, so
14,000
your
feet.
coach thinks you're actually working. I'm just going out
Yeah.
there for elevation gain. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's an altitude training camp, actually.
Oh,
Yes, there we
perfect.
go.
Perfect.
Now you're learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Wait,
Colorado is like one of those states where like literally everywhere you look could be like a postcard or a poster with some kind of inspirational quote next to it, because it's so beautiful everywhere. I love Colorado. Oh my gosh. In the summer.
do you,
I'm not a big snow
yeah,
person,
it's
so
not bad.
yeah.
Now, Anna, you mentioned, I try to get away from Colorado. I love Colorado. But you mentioned rodeo, you mentioned cyclocross early, and then one of the things that you said earlier too is you were racing mountain bike. Are you strictly like road, or in the off season, do you go do these other events, or do your coaches say, hell no, don't crash, so stick to the road? I mean, what do you, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's a great question. I love off-road riding, racing. I love cross. I love mountain bikes. I love gravel. So I try and incorporate as much as I can. For the rest of the season, actually, I will be racing gravel and mountain bikes. So I think we got gravel nationals next weekend, that I'll be doing, and then doing like Big Sugar and Little Sugar in October, mountain bike marathon nationals. That's kind of my plans for the rest of the year. But I do think it is like a tricky thing because a lot of times, especially like at the higher level, there's a lot of pressure to just be in one discipline. And that's definitely
Mhm.
something I've kind of run into this year. Because when the year started, I was planning on doing all the disciplines and kind of seeing like what I was going to be good at, what I had potential in. Because when I started the year, I didn't have any commitments to a team, didn't have a European block on my calendar. And so I had a lot of plans to do more mountain biking, and then that kind of shifted when I signed with Siniska. And then I've kind of advocated for myself to be able to come back and do those off-road races because I think it's important because it makes me really happy. And I think when I'm
Yeah.
training and racing in a way that makes me happy, like that makes me faster. And then I also just think it's great for development. I think just the skills really cross over quite well. And I do think it's important, especially like for newer riders like myself or anyone who's getting into the sport, like just do it all. Like do it all. Do what it makes you happy, what is fun. Because I do think it just makes you a better all-around rider. And like my coach is very supportive of that too. He knows I like mountain biking and all the disciplines. I think he asked me on a call a couple weeks ago. He's like, Anna, is there any discipline you don't want to do? And I was like, nope, I want to do it all. So how do we make that work?
Yeah.
So will you do it with Siniska then? Will that be you'll be repping with the kit there? Or do they have a mountain bike team? Do they have a gravel team, or is just as you said you advocated it, so they gave you the green light?
Yeah, so this year we don't really have an off-road program. The team's brand new this year, so I think they're still trying to figure out, what their resources and everything. Um, but so right now they're just a road team. But for gravel stuff, I will be riding for them. We're trying to maybe build in some gravel for next year, and for the rest of this year. And so kind of excited to see where that goes. As of right now, there's no mountain bike side of the team or mountain bike support there. So I'll just be racing independently on the mountain bike. And then we'll kind
Mhm.
of see what next year holds. Because I was a late sign to the team, they kind of honored that I had prior commitments and like a prior race calendar. So they kind of let me come home a bit early to fulfill those commitments. So
That's
How much
cool.
pressure does that take? How much pressure does it take off of you that you said your income will now be from the team, and you don't have to worry about 9 to 5 and then doing your job and then going out and training? I mean, that's got to be a huge re- release, right?
yeah, for sure. This is I mean, I got home from Europe a week ago. So this is my
Hmm.
first week kind of adjusting to this new lifestyle where I'm like, oh yeah, like I don't have work, I don't have school. Because when I'm in Europe, it was just different because like just life was just different. I was with the team all the time and everything. So I'm definitely still learning how to be a quote unquote professional athlete and learning how to build those routines and that structure in. It's definitely something I'm excited to figure out. It's been kind of my dream since I started
Yeah,
sport back in middle school. So I'm excited to kind of see what
yeah,
what
yeah.
happens.
I bring it up only because we've had she's a good friend and we've had her on the pod, Melanie Wong,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean full time, working full time, and then racing at that level. I mean, she's amazing. I ride with her a lot. Well, she's hurt right now, but a lot of Saturdays to see her perform at that level, and you can't. Sometimes you have to wonder, my God, if she didn't have a full time job, what would we have? So it's got to be a
Yeah.
huge amount of pressure off your shoulders.
Yeah, definitely. And that was part of my choice with signing with Siniska again was that I was gonna have that freedom to train full time and see like what I can achieve with, the ability to train higher volume, higher intensity, recover better. And so yeah, I'm excited to see kind of what gains are made in this off season and what next year holds.
Yeah, it must take a tremendous amount of discipline, though, right? Because if you're sitting there and you got to look at it and go, "Wow, I don't have a race for 3 months," so and I don't have to
Yeah,
go to work. It's got to take a tremendous amount of self discipline.
yeah, for sure. I definitely think it's a balance because I think sometimes when you have too much time just to devote to training, it almost becomes a little bit overwhelming. You
Mhm.
know, it's like you can only really ride your bike so many hours a day, and you can only think about riding your bike so many hours a day. And so I
Wait.
think it is
What?
important.
Wait, what did you
What?
just say?
What? We were just
Wait,
getting along so well, and then all of a sudden this comes up.
where did you find her, Mike? What the hell?
Yeah.
Cut, cut.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I could
I'm
totally
sorry,
see
we
that.
cut you off,
Yeah,
Anna. We're
sorry.
No, no,
sorry.
Yeah.
no, you're good.
Boy, you lost us there for a second. Jeez.
See, well, that's why you guys have a podcast about cycling. You know, gives you a break from training, but you're still talking about it, still into
Right.
it.
So we don't drive
But
our
yeah,
family crazy.
yeah,
Too late.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Too late.
I just think it's important, to have something else outside of cycling to kind of ground you. Because I mean, at the end of the day, like bike racing is so like fickle, like teams lose funding all the time, races go under, you get injured, right? You
Yeah.
eventually, age out of the sport. And so I just think it's really important to always have something outside of cycling that just kind of grounds you in the real world. And so I'm trying to figure out kind of what that is for me right now, just like if it's going to be work, grad school, something in between. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
also important to be able to train a lot. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
So you mentioned a coach. So does Siniska, are they providing your coach for you? Is that part of the team deal, or do you still keep an independent coach? And is that
Yeah, so all the girls have an independent coach that we
okay?
work with outside of the team. So we have like our team directors that will kind of, lead everything when we're at a team camp or at a race or something. But outside of that, we all have individual training. So my coach is Ben Day. He used to work with Bike Exchange, and he now is with I think it's called American Magic. It's the sailing cycling program.
Okay.
Um, Super cool. I got connected with him through USA Cycling, and he's awesome. So I work with him individually on my training, and then all of us, I think, have different coaches on the team.
Right. So when you're working with Ben, is it very structured, or do you have the ability to do random stuff? Because that's something that's come up where coaching styles, some coaches are really like, you must do this, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays are this, and then Friday you have to be on the, or do you have the ability to, because in the community sometimes there's opportunities to just go do something that seems like fun, and that's part of it too, right, is to have fun. So do you have that flexibility, or are you pretty much locked into a really rigid regimen?
I'd say I definitely have like a little bit of flexibility. I think it really varies from athlete to athlete and coach to coach, like
Hmm.
what that looks like. Um, there's definitely been times where it's like, oh, I go on a group ride, like when I have an endurance ride, and it's like, okay, I went a little hard that day, maybe for my endurance training, and it's like, oh, well, the boys were going fast and I didn't want to get dropped. So there's
Yeah.
been a couple times where my coach has been like, okay, Anna, like maybe that wasn't a great choice to go on the group ride for that ride. Like next time, ride in your zone and do it right. But then sometimes it's like, oh, I had a 4-hour ride and I just went and I rode my mountain bike for 4 hours. And so, that's great. And he's supportive. Sometimes I'll go for a run instead of an easy ride just because I still love running and it makes me happy and it makes my body feel good. And that's very controversial. I'd say a lot of my teammates or even other coaches would be like, oh, you should never run as a cyclist. It gives you bad legs. It's not helpful. You should just ride your bike more. And some people
Yeah.
would be like, oh, you shouldn't mountain bike. You're going to get hurt. It's not worth it. It's not as consistent as riding on the road would be. So there's always going to be so many judgments and opinions, but I think it's just important to have a coach that knows you well as an individual. Because like my coach knows what makes me thrive and what makes me happy. And then he honors that, and then it's also important for the athlete to know, like, when it's important, like you do have to, buckle down. Like there's times I'll say no to a group ride because I have intervals and I'm going to go do those, right? So I think it's just a balance and it's just figuring out what works for you, and knowing what works for you isn't going to look the same as someone else, which I think is really important. And it definitely took me a while to figure that out, but I think all the highest level athletes know that and honor that, and so it's definitely hard at times. But
Yeah. Yeah, I always felt like, growing up racing and everything, to people telling you, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, or you can't do that. No, I always felt like that was just kind of motivation. It's like, oh, really? Watch me, you know, you know, this is who I am. I can't, you
Yeah.
know, this is what I do. I'm just gonna do it my way, you know. It's the way I always kind of approached it. And I think it's so important mentally, especially to fight burnout and some of the other pitfalls in cycling, overtraining. You got to keep it fun and keep it loose. And do you, you know, as the saying goes. So yeah, it's good to hear that you're sticking to your guns. And yeah, if running makes you happy, go run, you know?
Yeah, I have to imagine it's, because Mike and I were joking about that, right? But we've always joked that 80% physical and 40% mental, right? So I would just can't imagine what would happen. Here we were saying, like, you think about something other than cycling, but what does it change when all of a sudden it is a job, right? I mean, I loved French fries growing up, but then for 2 weeks at the New York State Fair, I cooked French fries. I couldn't look at another one for like, it's like, no. So when it
Uh,
becomes a job, it's got to be different. So I think a coach that allows you to break it up is fantastic. It's got to keep it somewhat fresh.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely appreciate the mental side. I mean, you can ask Alec. I definitely was joking that whole first camp with USAC that everything was all mental. I was like, oh, I don't have to train. It's all mental. Like, I don't know what my power is. It's all mental. Like, my power meter doesn't work. It's all mental, you know?
yeah,
And I think that's a big part of it. And I think sometimes in cycling, we get too wrapped up in the numbers, too wrapped up in what's the perfect training, what's the perfect diet, what's the perfect this or that. And I mean, a lot of times it's like if you're mentally tough, you can get through a lot of things.
right.
And it's also individual, you know, so it's really important to have that happiness and that mental toughness, whatever that brings for you.
Yeah,
It's
you know,
funny.
oh,
It's
go
funny.
ahead.
I'm sorry, Mike, but Marie Silly Blaze was on a while back, former pro from out of Canada, and she turned us on to this book. How bad do you want it? And it's all about the mental aspects of it. Mike, I've listened to more of it on the ride up, and all the time I'm going, I was just sitting there going, yeah, that this is why I didn't do well in this race, and this is why I didn't do well. So it's so if you haven't read the book, I read the book, take a listen to the book. It's incredible, but it just reinforced how much potential I think I could unlock if I could just start using my brain a little bit better. So
Yeah,
Well,
it's a great book. I've
and
read it. It's great.
is it
to,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
to your point about mental, I think Dave got it wrong. I think it was 80% mental, 40% physical. But I worked with a guy, he was a big time US pro, but he had gotten out of shape and he just wasn't into it anymore. And but not like crazy out of shape, but he was just thick, you know, it just had a different body than he did as a racer. And we would go on these group rides at Giant, and he would surprise everyone, you know, because and I remember riding alongside of him one time, and I said, I go, I think you're pretty much blowing everybody's mind right now. And he goes, dude, he says, I've been through so much mental battles. He's like, riding with a bunch of sales reps. Yeah, no problem. But you know, he had a big gut on him, you know, but he still like he had the mind to where I don't know. It's just interesting how yeah, it's something that it's really untapped. We've Marie brought up that book, and I keep talking about this and probably driving the listeners crazy, but she did this FTP test without her computer, and she had an 18% improvement in her FTP without looking at it, you know.
I
And
love
so
that. That's
yeah,
so cool. Yeah.
right. And yeah, so but you know, I think all of us kind of like we're fighting this thing. There's like the Strava, and then there's the people that don't want to do Strava, and then there's like the data, and then the non-data. But at the end, I think we're all really into the data, but maybe we don't want to look at the data all the time, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, I'm kind of like on the bike. I like having it there. I just like it. But I don't spend a lot of time with the data afterwards. That's where, like, if I had a coach or something, I feel like they could really help me. Like, hey, you bonehead, you're doing this over and over and again. You should knock it off. And maybe that would help me. But I don't know. I just find that I like to know how far I've gone, how much time have I been on the bike? I've had the responsibilities. And so I don't know. I appreciate the data, but I'm not married to this concept of like, I gotta be at 300 watts, for whatever time period. I don't do a lot of that.
Yeah, and like I think it is pretty individual, like what your relationship with like training data is. But I think for anyone, like it's complex, right? There's times where that data really serves an important purpose for training and is really necessary. But then there's times when it really takes away from training. And I mean, I've seen a lot of athletes, and I would say even myself, like when I was running, when I first made the jump from like high school to college running, like I was really tied to like the data, the weekly miles, the weekly pace, you know. And I think it became a negative because sometimes when we're so focused on the training, we like allow that to be a measurement of like self-worth or like whether or not you did your training right. I think it's funny because a lot of people who use Training Peaks, it's like if you're in like I think it's like 10 minutes. The funny thing is I don't even know what the measure is. I think it's 10
Yeah.
minutes of the training time, then it goes green. And if you're outside of 10 minutes to your designated ride time, then it's like yellow. And then if you don't do the ride right, then it's red. And I know athletes who it's like, if their Training Peaks doesn't turn green that day, then they didn't do their training right. Right. And they're not good enough. And they failed that workout, even if it was like the difference of 30 seconds, right? Like
Yeah.
that shouldn't matter, but it becomes like this kind of mental crutch to like give you, I don't know, confidence or security or whatever that is. Um, and then like you look at my Training Peaks and like half of it's yellow because I did it on my mountain bike and I was supposed to do it on my road bike, or like, there's just I went for a run instead of a ride, but at the end of the day, like it all evens out. And the mental side of it is more important, right? So it's like knowing that your training is good enough, and knowing that even if you weren't perfect, like say you didn't ride your amount of time you were supposed to or at the right intensity, if you show up to race day and you're mentally strong, like it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? It's an arbitrary thing. So there's definitely a time and a place for data, but I think it's a double-edged sword at a certain extent. So it's just
I concur. I mean, if someone's thing is yellow or whatever, and then they look at it and they said they didn't train, then that to the mental aspect, that's failure, right? That's
mhm.
failure, and that's just to put in that much work into what, and to go to bed at night thinking, "Wow, I failed." It's just there's just something wrong. That's just wrong. I'm sorry. I no data to back that up per se, but to me, it's all about yes, I've accomplished something. So
Well, I think the thing that fuels a lot of the uncertainty and maybe beating yourself up is we all have these moments where uh, everything goes right in a race, and you just at the finish you have it and you just give it all, and it's like everything aligns just perfectly and you nail it. And then more often than not, though, that doesn't happen. So then it starts in your head like, okay, so what did I do? What happened? Was it my food? Is it my weight? Is it my my training schedule for that week? I shouldn't have done that ride on Friday, or you just start, I don't know, obsessing over the unknown. And so and I've never had a coach. And I have never paid for a coach. I had a buddy of mine that he gave me some tips, but so I privately wonder, like, if I was getting like the proper type of coaching, then maybe I would have these different results. But my job's pretty. I've traveled a lot for work, and I like to ride with my accounts. That's a big part of what I do, and so it to stick to a schedule just doesn't really work for me. And plus I realized that I don't really care that much about racing, as I'm 57, so I'm in full has-been mode at this point. So racing is kind of like, I'll do it every once in a while, but I just love riding my bike, and so that's kind of what I try to focus on and have fun with my accounts. But I think when I do race, I do think about like, oh man, I put in so many hours on the bike and so much work. If I would just kind of like really not be such a knucklehead, I could show up to these events in a much better position, but I just don't do it. No.
So,
Yeah.
so 3 months in Colorado. When does the team start to get back together? What's when do training camps start, and when does that all start getting ready for next year?
Yeah, so I don't have any specific dates or schedule yet, but I think we'll have a team camp in the winter, so like late January, early February. We'll go back over to France where our service course is. We'll have team camp out there. And I think this first team camp's like a lot of media stuff, equipment, stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then we might do a couple races in Spain in the winter, and then we'll come back for the US block, and then we'll head over to Europe for the big summer fall block. I think is
Wow.
our general
Yeah.
plan. Yeah.
So
Right.
cool. Yeah. Boy, that
Is
that sounds pretty
is it
wonderful.
is it is it one of those things that it's kind of set, like at the beginning of the year they'll say, all right, these are the 12 races you're doing, or will you get a last minute call and say, hey, we need you in Europe to go to fill in for somebody? Is it pretty set, or are you winging it a lot?
This first year on the team was definitely winging it. We had a lot of riders get sick. We had a couple girls get mono, a couple girls have concussions, have injuries. So it's like kind of a fluke year where, I mean, you don't normally have 6 riders that are out, but that's kind of what happened this year.
Yeah.
And so this year was definitely a little bit more like chaotic. I signed with the team, and they're like, "Hey, here's your Expedia receipt. You're getting on a plane here." And I was like, "Oh shoot, okay, like, you're going to Europe. We don't have a return flight. Just show up and race." So that was like,
Yeah.
that was,
Celebrate and
I
cross
think,
your
different.
fingers.
Yeah. I think next year will be a little bit more like structured or planned, since we just, the teams has more experience and stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of it is kind of just last minute, just because you never know. The other tough thing that I didn't realize until I was on a UCI team is that it's hard for new teams to get invites to races sometimes.
Right.
So sometimes we don't have like our schedule because we haven't heard back from the race directors, like if Saniska's in the race or not. So that's like another element that just adds to the kind of logistical complexity of the team. And then the riders, get affected by that. And then say we get into 2 races on the same weekend, do we try and do a split program? Who goes where? It's just, it's always kind of up in the air. So I've really learned how to be flexible this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine getting that call. It's like, oh, Europe. Oh, twist my arm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No return flight. Ah, okay. I'll take my
Yeah, shoot.
chances.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so
Todd,
does a team have goals like Roubaix or the FOMS? I mean, is that a realistic goal for the team at this point?
Yeah, so our goal is to get an invite to the tour for sure. I'm
Yeah.
not exactly sure what the timeline is on that and like how achievable it is.
Hmm.
To be completely honest, I'm so new to this whole road racing scene,
Sure.
especially the Europe scene, that I don't really know how it all works. It's definitely a learn by doing experience, but I know that that is the team's goal in like the next few years.
Boy, that would
Yeah,
be amazing. Yeah,
it would be really cool.
to
Yeah,
get on
for
that
sure.
stage. Yeah.
speaking of it, so Mike mentioned Unchained, right? The
Mhm.
documentary, and it is fascinating. And it does. I think it was great to see. I mean, I've been watching racing for so long, so I understand the tactics. But to actually have conversations with people that this was the first time understanding cycling and now starting to understand it. But particularly the flip side of that is that they looked and they see in there, they see these big tour buses, they see these champagne toasts, and they see these. I mean, is it that on a continental team, is it that glamorous? I mean, like it can't be, life on the road can't be as good as it looks for some of the pro teams. I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's definitely not as glamorous as it seems.
Uh-huh.
We've had a lot of hotels, a lot of kind of sketchy race hotels, a
Hmm.
lot of doing laundry in the sink, a lot of,
Uh-huh.
I think we like didn't have a kitchen for like a month. So it's just like making sandwiches. We'd make kettle boiled eggs. That was a big thing on the team. So like a hotel that has a kettle, if we don't have a kitchen, we throw some eggs in there. The European girls taught us this. Lots of kettle eggs, lots of yeah, just kind of making it work. It's definitely not as glamorous as it seems,
Right.
at least at this level. Yeah.
How about the most important position on any team is the massage therapist, in my mind anyway. Do you have a good massage therapist, and how often are you visiting that person?
Yeah, we're very lucky that our soigneurs are also massage therapists. So they are amazing and take care of us in between
Uh-huh.
every race. So that is a glamorous side of it for sure.
Yes. If I could get massaged like even once a week, oh yeah. I go every 3 weeks and it's not enough, but it's amazing every time, I just leave there. It's kind of like after doing a big ride, that feeling where you just sit and you're completely satisfied, like you just yeah, it's a great thing.
I got to
Yeah.
try it then. I had one massage session in my life, or a series of them, and it was after a crash. So this was more medicinal than like, you know, and I'm like, I'm never going back. This sucks. I hated every minute of it. I'm like, no, no, this can't be fun. Who takes pleasure in this? And I
Oh,
walk it. I
yeah,
hated it.
I'll give you my gal. She's amazing. But
Yeah.
yeah, but that's the one thing I always thought, boy, if I was on a really like a team, I'd be wearing out that massage therapist, you know. We'd be best friends, or I'd be the biggest nuisance in that person's life, one or the other. Yeah. But that's good to hear that you're getting taken care of. And so when you're not around the team though, do you get massage? Do you do any other like physical, like chiropractic or massage or anything like that, physical therapies that are a little bit unconventional, or well, I would say unconventional, but just to keep your body tuned up?
Yeah, so when I was living in San Luis Obispo, I was working with a really great massage therapist, bodywork guy. He's
Mhm.
amazing.
Mhm.
Mike Peebler in San Luis Obispo, shout out. Um, like I swear he does, I don't know, he like stretches weird stuff, finds weird knots. It hurts so bad. I
Oh
think
yeah.
I'm screaming the entire time I'm there.
Hmm.
Probably annoying him so much. He's like, be tougher. But afterward, like I get on the bike and it's like, oh wow, I didn't even know like my hip could feel this open. Like I
Yeah.
have a whole range of motion that I didn't even think was possible. It's crazy. Like just the stuff that he does. He's very like holistic, focused, and that I think makes a huge difference in training. If I could see him every week, I would.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I do that. I do some strength training. I worked with Derek at Dialed Health, another local,
Yeah. Cool.
to do some strength training with his programs.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and then everything else just kind of on an as need basis. When I was in Europe, I saw a physio in Girona who was amazing because I was having some weird back pains and stuff, and she figured that out. So I think everything else is just find support when you need it.
Talk to me a little bit about that. The strength training. Does that, like, are you doing that only in the off season, or are you doing that while you're racing? And then like so you it's the race season. We've got a race at the end of the week. We're doing our training rides. Do you still uh, strength train, or that goes by the wayside when the season starts? Because I'm grappling with that right now, trying to decide whether I should continue lifting or not. So
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, During the off season, I was strength training like 2 days a week pretty consistently. Um, when I left for Europe, I definitely stopped strength training in
Yeah.
pretty much any capacity. One of the Dialed Health programs is like a summer maintenance program that's like designed for like no equipment and just kind of to maintain through like the race season. So that was really helpful. I did lots of mobility work, like lots of kind of core work, but I honestly just struggled to find a routine in Europe because we were moving like every 2 to 3 nights. We
yeah,
were
how
like
could you
in a
do it,
different
right?
hotel. Yeah, and sometimes like hotel rooms were so small that like we had 3 girls and like we couldn't even have like one suitcase or 2 suitcases open at the same time. Like that's how small these rooms were. And so
Yeah.
it's like, how am I supposed to lift weights, you know, or do any sort of strength? Um, so it's definitely something that I know for me, like I can improve on for next year is like find better routines, and find more consistent strength training. I think it's important to kind of maintain like some of it throughout the race season because it is such a long season that if you don't strength train at all, like you will lose a lot of that. But it's tricky. I don't have a great answer for that.
Yeah, yeah.
It seems
Well,
like it's pretty divided when you talk to racers about strength training. A lot of them will say it's just an off season thing and you build muscle, and then during the season you just focus on riding, and then back to weight training in the off season. But
I,
there
Yeah.
are those that mix it together too. So that's where
yeah,
this question came from. I
I'd
have
like to look. I'd like to look at that off that whatever that maintenance program because I and again I asked this question. Flavia says she doesn't do it, right? And then Helen Gilbert Snyder, I remember on when she was on,
yeah.
she said that she does it in the off season and doesn't. She said she comes into the season heavy because she's lifted, and then the weight goes off because she stops lifting over, throughout the season. So I guess maybe it's just an individual thing, but it's definitely weighing heavy on my mind.
While we're talking
Yeah.
about massage and some of these other things, sorry to cut you off. Have you ever tried cupping?
I have, yeah. So the massage therapist that I see in Slow, Mike, he does a lot of cupping
Uh-huh.
as part of his practice. I think it works for me pretty well, honestly. I've had good results.
Yeah.
Um, but
Would he
sometimes,
do it on your back or your legs or both? Where were you receiving the cupping therapy?
yeah, so he has done it on like one of my quads because I was having a quad issue at one point. But I see the most benefit like on my back.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with like really tight traps, as I know a lot of people do. Um, he actually identified that it was actually like my lats that were really tight.
Okay.
And so he did a lot of cupping for that. It's crazy because when he does do all the cups, you can really see like where you need it because like that's like what bruises. Like you get like
Uh-huh.
those gnarly welts, and you're like, oh, that was really bad. There was a lot of bad stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So my therapist started doing that for me a couple years ago, and I responded so well to it. And that got me it got me online. I was just like, is this quackery? Is this just like, like placebo? But there seems to be some real evidence to it. I certainly believe for myself it does help. But my therapist told me, she goes, oh, you could buy a cup set because I really like it on my quads. She does it on my back and my quads. But so I bought this cup set off of Amazon for $29, and I do my quads probably once a week. And it's so nice. She
Hmm.
basically, what she did is she positioned them all on there, took a picture, and then so now when I'm at home, I just kind of dial up that picture and put them in the same spot. And yeah, it's super helpful for me.
Yeah, when I was running and had a lot of injuries, I did cut myself at home. And it did help a lot, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So you earlier, we should probably wrap it up here pretty soon. We're getting kind of near the buzzer. Uh um you mentioned Olympics earlier. Are you interested in the Olympics? Is that something that you could kind of see as a potential goal going forward, or where does that sit in your goals?
Yeah, I would say that's probably my like big reach scary dream goal
Uh-huh.
would be Olympics. I don't honestly know how attainable that is. I don't know in what discipline that would be. I want to try and get on the track this winter
Hmm.
um and see kind of where that goes. I'm not sure like if it's going to be really on the road. I'm still figuring all of this out, but yeah, that is definitely a dream goal for sure.
I can't believe we didn't ask this of all the questions. So you were talking about, you just mentioned discipline. We were talking about you on the road, and sometimes when it's a hilly course, it's this, I help this person if it's a sprinter. Where do you consider yourself, your strength? Is it climbing? Is it sprinting? Is it time trial? What's your gift?
Another
Aside from
great
just being
question.
aside from being incredibly intelligent and on the fast track to so on the bike.
Yeah, I would say I'm kind of an all-rounder right now, which is kind of just avoiding that because I'm not exactly sure what I'm good at. I definitely can climb, which is good. I always say like I can out climb the sprinters and I can out sprint the climbers. So I'm always just
Uh-huh.
kind of like somewhere in between. So like uphill finishes are good for me. Um, or like short punchy climbs are good. I'm pretty strong on those. So anywhere from like, I don't know, a minute to like maybe 3 minute climbs are pretty good. Uh, but I definitely like still so new to this training and stuff. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm not I feel like I've never trained my sprint. So maybe I'd be a good sprinter. I've never really trained for like a 1.5 second power. Um, and so I mean, who knows? I think it's kind of gets complex because like to be a good sprinter, you have to know how to position really, really well. And I
Yeah.
think when I first joined Siniska, we didn't really have a sprinter, and they kind of just looked at me and they're like, "Anna, you're our sprinter." And I was like, "Are you sure about that? Like, have you looked at my power? Like, I don't know if that's a good idea."
Right.
And we quickly realized that like I probably wasn't going to be the bunch sprinter, and I would be more suited for like climbing, breakaways, stuff like that. But I think honestly, like I think it can change a lot with training and with time. I'm excited to time trial more. I don't have a time trial bike. I've never had one. I really want to get one for next year because I think I could be really good at that because I love the mental side of time trialing. It's
Hmm.
just so raw. It's like you just have to dig so deep. Like I love that.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be a strength. I just still figuring it out. Have a very open mind. Trying it all. Just gonna
Well, I
see.
would say be an all-rounder. That's awesome. If you on any given day, that it could go your way. Whereas if you lock into the sprinter or the climber role, then you're kind of like, okay, there's these 6 stages of this event I can be relevant in, and the rest of the time I'm hanging on for dear life or whatever, like the sprinters. I worked for Cannondale a long time ago and we had Mario Cipollini, and Cipollini was like on top of, he would win a bunch of stages early in the tour, but he would never finish, because he couldn't make the time cuts through the mountains,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think all rounder, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and like I think it's important too to like never like book yourself into like one position.
Yeah,
Like you're saying, I mean, the people will sometimes just like look at you and just judge you by like your body type and be like, "Oh, you're a sprinter. Oh, you're a climber." And I sometimes get that a lot because I am like pretty muscular, and so sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, you're a sprinter," but I'm like, "Really? Like I can actually climb pretty fast. Like don't
yeah.
count me out." Like, and I just think that's important because I think sometimes you can hold yourself back by like thinking that you're one thing when
Yeah,
really like you could be amazing at time trialing, but you could look like a climber, or
right.
maybe you're super good at positioning and you'll win every bunch sprint because you're in the right place at the right time, but your 1 minute power isn't as strong as your 20-minute power. So I just think like it's you can't count yourself out of anything, or categorize yourself too strongly because I think you miss out on potential when you do that.
Yeah. So
Well said. Well said.
okay, let's finish with this last thing here. One of the things that keeps coming up on the podcast is the cyclist's obsession with weight. And we've had so many people on where it's really mind-boggling the the amount of eating disorders. I mean, that's something that like when I started this podcast, or when we started this podcast, I should say, I had no idea that eating disorders were so prevalent in cycling. And so, do you battle this at all? And do you know teammates that battle this? We had Benjamin Frederick on, and
And
he was,
Frederick.
thank you. He was talking about his own personal struggle. He had a traumatic brain injury, but also eating disorder. And he was like a UCI CX. He is a UCI CX high level racer, and then he said it all kind of switched for him when he saw Sagan. And Sagan was, Sagan's a big guy. And they were asking about his weight, and he's like, hey, I just eat whatever, whatever I need. It's all fuel for the body.
Well,
And then that kind of helped him change his approach to it. And I know
there's a
Dave,
question there's a question in here. So sorry, Mike, go ahead. There's
sorry,
a
long story to get to a question, but Dave also beats himself up over 5 pounds, on the scale. And it's like, I don't know. Is that something that is an issue for you or your teammates? And how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think it's really important that you brought this up because it is a hugely, prevalent problem in cycling, especially in men's cycling, which I think it's ignored a lot. It's like, oh, eating disorders are a women's issue. But I mean, I've talked to a lot of cyclists, I've seen a lot of cyclists, and the women are doing it a lot better than the men, I think, right now,
Good.
when it comes to eating and stuff. So I guess for me personally, like I struggled with an eating disorder when I was in college, when I was running cross country. Because I mean, like I said, like I'm more muscular, like I'm not like a skinny runner build. So when I started running, I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to look like a runner. Like I need to be skinny. I need to look like a runner in order to, be taken seriously as a runner. And I think like that really deep down is like a self-worth, right? It's a confidence thing.
Mhm.
A little backstory, I ran my senior year in high school and then went straight D1. And so it was another really fast progression, which means when I got to college, I was like, I am in so over my head, right? And I wanted to be that fast freshman. I wanted to be taken seriously. And and then I got injured. And so that quickly spiraled into, I was like, I need to look fit because I can't actually run right now because I'm injured, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm not legitimate on this team. And so I need to look
yeah.
as fit as possible. So I was like, I need to have a six pack. I need to be skinny. And I was getting pressure from my coach at the time to cross train to stay fit, right? To burn a certain number of calories to stay fit, which I think fed a really toxic narrative on my cross country team because I saw a lot of my teammates and myself like really start to struggle with that body image and that like that eating side of it because they care more about, looking fit and being small than actually being able to perform. And it clicked for me because I was like, I'm skinnier than I've ever been. I'm absolutely shredded, but I haven't set foot on a track in a year. So
Right.
how far does that really get me?
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I went through that before I got into cycling because I think cycling has way more eating issues than running does, or it's pretty equal. Because people are so obsessed with the power to weight ratio, which I'm not going to lie, like it is a legitimate factor when it comes to performance, but it's not everything. And it's kind of the same thing with the obsession about data, right? It's a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
So if you're not eating, you're not going to be performing, right? You're going to get sick. You're going to start to decline. And it's a really slippery slope because then when you start to see your performance go down, you're like, what am I doing wrong? I'm probably eating too much. I'm probably too heavy. Let me restrict even more, even more, even more, and then you have, your back stress fractures. I know that's like not a thing in cycling as much. It's more in running, like the stress fractures, but you get some other injury, right? You can't recover from training. And then therefore it's like, you're not performing, you're not racing. um I don't know if you guys have seen the Mark Cavendish documentary on
Yes.
Yeah,
Netflix,
I was going to bring
but
it up. Yeah.
yeah, I recently watched that when I was in Europe. And it was really interesting because I was like, his journey just embodied like what I've been saying for years is it's like it's a double-edged sword. And I think at the highest level of sport, like all athletes have like this crazy drive, right? And it is self-destructive when it goes too far. And it's like that level of self-destruction that gets you to that edge of performance is also what can tear you down at that level. And
Agreed.
I just think it's like it's important to know the limits. And so like when it comes to food, it's like, yes, it's a factor, but you can't let it go like too far because if you're too obsessed, like you're just gonna shoot yourself in the foot. Like,
Yeah.
and so I do, yeah. And like with my background in nutrition, it's tough because like I've learned all the science and everything, and then I hear and see like what coaches or teammates or directors or whatever are saying, and that just goes against like everything I've been taught in school.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
it's definitely like sometimes tricky. And I think in Europe it was hard because the European like culture is definitely more heavy in like eating disorders, I would say, than like the US, just because it's more competitive and it's more old school.
Mhm.
I think the newer cycling perspective is much more like positive around food. Like food is fuel. You do need it. And I think at the highest level, like performance directors realize that. But then you kind of get this like weird gray area in the Conti level where you have a lot of old school influence still. It's not as monitored. You don't have as many resources, and it's a lot easier for people to kind of get away with putting more pressure on athletes and like on weight. Like our team is great. Our team feeds us. It's amazing. And they're
Huh.
super positive about it. But I mean, I know there's Conti teams where like, you know, they don't necessarily get food or they get pressured to not eat. And like, I just think that's so bad.
Crazy.
And that's definitely scary, I think, in sport to have that culture.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so important. It's yeah.
I think the fact
I'm
that
guilty. I'm guilty. I obsess over it.
I think
So
the fact that we have watts per kilo as an actual unit of measurement, I think that is something that probably drives it a lot, because in your training you can get, you kind of plateau with your power. You don't just keep progressing power. It just got
Mhm.
you find your zone, whatever that is, and then it's like, well, I can't, my power is plateaued. I'm doing everything I can to improve my power. How do I go faster? Well, if I lose weight, right? Watts per kilo. And so it does kind of drive this whole, if you're really trying to improve, it's just ironic that you have to starve your body when you're asking your body to perform at the highest level. It's just such a weird juxtaposition in the sport. And it's something that I agree with your assessment that the modern, like we're seeing these results now where people are taking in like massive amount of carbs an hour and having great results, like all-time results. And so to the old school, that doesn't work for the old school mentality, So yeah, there's still a lot. I think there's a lot that can be done in the space of nutrition and athletic performance, but it's great that you're aligned with a team that doesn't have that type of culture, because yeah, I think it's really something that holds people back in a lot of ways. Lastly, on this year's Tour de France, we were watching this. I told this story a few weeks ago, but at the end, Vingegaard's out. He's got his jersey off, and he's walking around. He gives Pagasha a hug, and my wife just happens to walk in, and she's like, "Good Lord, who's that?" And I go, "That's the guy who just won the Tour de France." And she was just like, "He looks like Skeletor, you know?" And, and I said, "He's one of the best cyclists in the world, But it's just it's something that is always going to be a balance. And that's why when we get somebody like a Sagan or an Anna Hicks, it's got some muscle and she's kicking butt, that's something to really get excited about, because yeah, you just worry about people and the eating disorders. And when you see on the top of the sport, Pogascha's rail thin, Vinego's rail thin, you take Mariana Voss, some of the pro women, it's just, yeah, you could understand how the mindset could go that way. And but it is really unhealthy for most.
Yeah, and I think if we like kind of tie back into other things we've talked about in this conversation, is it's like, it's what was it, 40%, 80% mental? Like,
Yeah.
there's so much more than just your power to weight. And I will say that I have been told that women's cycling, for some reason, like body composition is not as strong of a determinant for performance as it is in men's. So I will
wow.
say that like the men do have it harder. And that's coming from Alec through Jim Miller. So a pretty good chain of resources right there that I got that information from.
Yeah.
And I do think they're right. And I think a lot of people at the high level are like, wait a second, like this women's cycling isn't playing out the same way as men's does in that sense. I think with men, it's like you have to be a certain, weight or whatever to be a good climber. And I think on the women's side, we're seeing more diversity in body type and doing different things. But yeah, I mean, it is, you can't deny that it's a factor in sport. But it's like, part of me is like, what if everyone fueled the way that science has told us is the proper way?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
would they actually be faster? Maybe. And I
Yeah.
think, like you said, like, people are taking in 120 grams of carbs an hour and performance is going up, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think it's interesting. And I think we'll see in the future, like more of a balance with nutrition. And like, I hope I mean, my message to any women or men getting into cycling is it's like, you don't have to look the part to be really good, right? Like
Yes.
you don't have to listen to the culture to be really successful in this sport. And I think that's just such an important message because, I mean, oftentimes, I mean, it's the same thing with data or what kit you're wearing or whether your white shoes match your white helmet. It's just like a matter of like feeling like you're good enough to belong into a
Yeah.
sport or you're good enough to be successful. But just honestly, just ignore all of that and like ride freaking hard and ride hard and be mentally tough. And like that'll take you pretty freaking far, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not about the bike you ride, it's not about the kit you wear, it's not about what you look like. It's about how hard you can push yourself when you need to push yourself. And whatever you need to do to be really good at that, you should do that.
Oh my God. I'm ready to run through a
Yeah.
freaking brick wall right now.
Yeah. What- Hey,
Yeah.
yeah,
That was
and
awesome.
Anna, yeah, absolutely. I love that. And by
Yeah.
the way, next time you're on, you don't have to say frickin'. We use the F word quite a bit on
Okay.
here, so it's just
I wasn't sure. I tried to
I'm
filter
just,
myself.
no.
My mom can hear me,
Just
so I
saying.
gotta
Okay.
filter myself at
Yeah.
home.
She's at her mom's house right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we've got an
Wait,
hour and a half here, Anna.
well, we can't wait.
Okay. Dave's gonna let's do it, Dave.
No, we said this. No, I won't even drop an F bomb. No, it's so important what's happening with your team. And it's so important that more people, more organizations, more companies get involved to support women's cycling. So
Yes.
please give a shout out to your sponsors. And shameless plugs. It's okay. We swear we don't edit. We give shameless plugs. So we need more people, more companies to line up. So if there's anyone you want to give a shout out to, go at it. Just
Yeah, totally. I want to shout out a couple of personal sponsors that helped me get to this team first. I have worked with Belay Apparel, a phenomenal company, great people. I love them. I've worked with Bonk Breaker, their nutrition company. Love them. I sadly can't work with them anymore because I'm on this team, but I am still amazing friends with them. So I just wanted to give them a shout out. And then Cyniska, we have amazing supporters that allow us to do what we do. Like we would not be anywhere without them. So Shimano is, huge. Like without them, we couldn't do what we're doing. So Shimano is huge for us. Ventum are the bikes that we ride. I went from my little aluminum beater bike to a really nice Ventum NS1 carbon, super fancy road bike. And I love it. It's amazing. The Ventum people also super supportive, super kind. It's been cool to see them grow and to see us grow like as a team as well. Our other sponsors, we work with Moo Apparel for all of our kits.
great kits, by
They're
the way.
amazing. Yeah, our kits are so cool. They did such a great job designing them. They look amazing. So they're awesome. We work with Victoria Tires. I think great tires. We
Yeah.
run their Corsa tires, super fast. Goo is our nutrition sponsor. Love Goo. They're awesome.
Yuri.
Yuri,
Yeah.
yes, I got to
Yeah.
meet Yuri at Sea Otter, and he was amazing.
How
So
awesome
fun.
is he, right?
Yeah, so cool. Their products
Yeah.
are amazing too.
Yes.
I have celiac disease, and they're all gluten free. So, and we have a peanut allergy girl on the team, so it works great. They're amazing all around.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think if I'm missing any of our sponsors. We work with Chateau Saint Martyry, which is a castle in France. And that's where our service course is. So
Oh,
they're a big
nice.
supporter of us just because that's they host our service course. We stay at the castle for team camps and stuff. So that's big.
Oh man, how cool is that?
Yeah. And then just also our team owners, Jeff, he owns Solution Tree, which is an education company. And they're the key to our team. So Jeff has been incredibly generous with supporting all of us, supporting our education, supporting our cycling dreams. So yeah, that's definitely the big one.
All right.
Sounds like an awesome program. Yep.
Yeah, it's really cool to be a part of. A lot of cool people involved. So
All right. And so how do our listeners follow along with Anna's journey? What's the best way?
Yeah, so I don't have a ton of social media, but I am on Instagram. So my Instagram is Anna with 3 N's Hicks. So yeah, follow along. I'm pretty active on Instagram. But
and Cynisca Cycling is spelled Cynisca, and they have an IG page as well, and you can see Anna and her teammates' exploits on there. And
Yes. The girls are
yeah.
starting a big stage race in France this week, so go follow along.
All
Right
right.
on.
Very
Cool.
cool. All right. Well, all right, let's wrap it up. Anna, it's been a real pleasure to have you on, and that the way you closed out the speech there was incredible. And I think it's great messaging to anybody out there that wants to get involved with sport on any level, you know.
I second that emotion. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. Okay.
Hey, Anya, when you're in Colorado, if you see him, send from me and my wife Sue, send Alec our love. So
Yeah,
if you're
Okay, I
able to hook up
will
with him,
do.
don't send him
Yeah.
any love from me, and tell that SOB. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we all love Alec over here, and
yeah.
yeah, he humbled us many times on the mountain, and but he did it with grace, and yeah, he's a great kid, great young man actually now, not a kid anymore. But all right, thanks so much, Anna. Appreciate it. We're gonna wrap it up here. Thanks everybody for listening. If you're interested in subscribing, you can subscribe at cyclejerkspodcast.buzzsprout.com and hit the subscribe button. So we appreciate that. And if you're like what we're doing, feel free to leave a positive review on one of the streaming platforms. All right,
There
that's
you
gonna
go.
do
There
it.
you go, Anna. Shameless plug. There you go.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you guys for having me.
Okay, but hang on. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. So oops.